I had been writing the X-Men back again after Gary and Arnold Drake were writing it. Dan had asked me to take it back because he wasn't happy with what Arnold was doing. I wasn't that eager to do it. I'd done that a little bit and so forth, but I did it for an issue or so. And then Neil came in. I thought, well, you know, I'll get off the X-Men. So I told Neil that, you know, I knew he'd done a little bit of writing at PC, a couple of stories. So I said, why don't you write the book, you know, and everything and so forth. And but Neil said, I read a couple of things that you wrote. Well, since then he said he'd never heard of them before he walked in the door. But at the time he said, he told me, you know, I read some things, you know, you wrote, so why don't you just keep writing it? Of course, that was a bad thing for him, because when you get Roy the writer, you also got Roy the associate editor, which means I was also his boss as well as his collaborator, and that, you know, would cause problems. But no, I loved working with Neil on that book. I think in some ways his X-Men, and I remember Gil Kane and I would concur, we thought that the X-Men was some of, in terms of quality, some of the very best work he ever did.
No, so I always thought, I felt the opposite on that. That was one of the few things I didn't like Neil on. I just felt this character didn't have basics.
Nobody's right all the time, right?
I know a lot of people love those books. They're quite treasured. And I was very odd that of all the books at Marvel, that was the one he wound up on.
He claimed he wanted to do a book that was going to be canceled, and Stan's home was going to be canceled an issue or two, but if Stan said anything like that, he was just saying that, you know, it was in danger of being canceled because no decision would have been made, or he wouldn't have asked me to go back in and write it for the last 2 issues. So, you know, there's a certain fantasy element at work there in some people's minds, but my God, how wonderful that work was. Yeah. I mean, I was just staggered. To see work come in from the best of Barry Smith after he got started, or the best of John Buscema, the best of Gene Colan and Doctor Strange, Neil, people like that. You know, Gil Kane when he turned in that first Captain Marvel after I took the plot that I gave him and everything. I mean, I just consider myself the luckiest person in the world to be able to work with people like that.
Well, you guys are terrific folks. Another question. Other questions? Yes, sir.
One of the things you hear about from those times is that a lot of the artists and maybe the writers didn't think of it as a real career. They were really into going on to advertising and other things. And how true, how prevalent was that kind of attitude in the old clothes?
Let me repeat the question. The question was, you hear that back then a lot of people didn't think of working on comics as a career. It was temporary work. How prevalent was it that people were just doing it until something better came along?
Much as Gary, because he probably did that.
The question was, when you were working for Marvel at that period, did you think of it as a long-term career, or was there something else you wanted to do career-wise? Was it something that you wanted to keep with, or thought you would stay with?
I don't know that I ever thought of it as something I was going to do forever. I don't really know that I was thinking about doing anything else. The hope was probably always maybe to write movies at some point, which never really happened. But other than that, I liked writing, and I was content to write comic books until I began to like drinking better.
There's a theme in Gary's answers here. We'll talk about that in the spotlight tomorrow. It's a very good story. Is that an answer to your question, sir? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I had a question related to the drinking. Not you specifically, but have you ever seen the show Mad Men about the advertising executives in the 60s on Eaton Heights and Avenue? I love the show, but when I watch it, I always think about Marvel and DC offices. During that time period, how reflective is that show of the time period and the culture that was there? Was there a whiskey bottle?
There was an old saying in New York, if you about drinking, says that everybody in New York is in danger of becoming an alcoholic. I don't know why they said that exactly. There was just something about the kind of pressure cooker life. You know, everyone's on an island. There's no trees except kind of the little tiny place in the middle. You know, things like that. And something about the combination of the pressure of the work and so forth had a tendency. And so when you got together, you just I think it happened a lot of places besides New York, but I think New York was a prime example of it. We never had much trouble with the office. The only people we had, as Gary has talked about his own thing, and the first thing that I learned about my idol from childhood, Bill Everett, creator of the Submariner, when he came in and started staying with Gary and me at our place in Greenwich Village, was that Bill, obviously, as he used to say, I have a little drinking problem, but I can handle it, which is what people tend to say. And he did sort of handle it most of the time, but except he never, except of course he could never really, make deadlines and things because he was always finding excuses not to. But there was a lot of that. I think a lot of people did some drinking, but we never had much trouble with it at the office or anything like that.
Let's take one more question. Yes, sir.
Wondering, do you feel you have more freedom on the sword and sorcery titles as opposed to the superhero titles? Working on Red Sun,
Yeah, because Stan didn't know what sword and sorcery was, so he kind of left us alone. But he saved the book. I said it many times. I didn't think of it, but after the sales were going down, those first 7 issues, and he looked at the covers and was saying, you got all these animals. He says you got a snake with a human head, and you got apes, and you got a spider, and you got a woman turning into, it's a woman for God's sake, turning into a tiger, and so forth. And just start putting, more humanoid things on the cover. And we did, well, by the next issue or 2, the sale went up, and the book was never in danger again. So Stan didn't have to know anything about sword and sorcery, he just knew about comics.
Well, we are out of time. Tomorrow I will be doing one-on-one interviews with Gary and Roy. Check your schedule. And there's also some other issues. I'm doing an interview later today with Wendy Peeney you may find very interesting. Would you join me in thanking Mr. Gary Friedrich and Mr. Roy Conan?
camera.